Welcome along. Today we're going to do a video on the Greensheeting procedure for the NZLMRA mower racing. Now, the first thing we're going to do is have a look at the website. So this is the official New Zealand Lawnmower Racing Association website. Okay, so the first thing you do is once you come into it, up the top is a menu, click on rules. So click on rules, come down to build regulations, click on build regulations, and all going well, it'll come up with the build regulations. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these. Now, if you have a bit of a look here, you can see that this is the rules and regulations version 2.0, 30th of the 10th, 2023. So these are the official rules that were passed at the last AGM. All right, so if we have a look down onto the page here, I've got a green sheet, a copy of a green sheet. It's not green, it's grey, but you can see what we're looking at. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill out the name, number, class, the date, the club you belong to, and the scrutineers who's doing it. Then we're going to come across here and we're going to go through each of these points as we go through and show you what we're talking about. So the first one on the list is chassis. So if we come back up to the screen up here and just click on what it says for chassis. So I'm going to click on chassis, takes me to chassis, and what it's saying is that the mower must use the original chassis floor pan from the front of the seat forward to the rear of the rear axle. It must have a rear panel to hide the rear, and it can have strengthening wherever you want to go on there, and fabrication for fitting other bits and pieces, okay? So the emphasis is on hiding the fabrication and modifications under the body panels, okay? So the idea is to take the original part and modify that, not build a new one and add bits to it. So if we come over to the actual mower over here, so this is the mower we're talking about. So when we talk about the chassis, we mean here's the front of the seat, so a line straight down through here, which is somewhere down here, okay? And then this is the front axle. So this piece of the chassis between there and there has to be the original chassis. And as you can see, this one is what they call a biscuit tin chassis. It's the original chassis that comes around here right through. This one actually comes right down back and around here as well. But the chassis is the original chassis between here. Yes, it's strengthened, but it's the original chassis, okay? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the chassis. Right, so the next thing we'll have a look at is the body we need to look at. So we'll come over here, click back and go up to body. Mower body. See if we go to the right place. Okay, so mower body must have hood, guards, rear panels, bulkhead and mower dash console. They may be modified to fit. The dash panels may have a steering support structure, and the rear of the mower must be covered to hide any additional structure or braking. The idea is to retain the appearance of a ride-on mower by using the original construction material. So checker plates and things like that are not to be used for structural panels like bonnets, guard, etc., but can be used for foot plates. So if we come back over to the mower here, if we're looking at the actual body panels themselves, we can see we've got the original bonnet, the original panels, the original guard here, all made out of the same material that they were originally made of. And if I drop the back of it down, which I probably should do, I'll just drop this down so you can have a look. So you can see at the back of the mower, we have a cover over the back, so it still looks like the original mower. And this is the original cover that was on the mower. But yes, there is strengthening in there that we've covered over the strengthening, okay? So we're looking for the original body material and shape of a lawnmower, okay? You can use aluminium checker plate on the sides and in the parts here, but the guards, the bonnet and these pieces cannot be made entirely of checker plate, okay? All right. Stop it there. All right, so now we're going to look at the width, sharp objects, chain guards, appearance, and we'll also do the footholds. So we'll come back up to here and we'll go into overall width. So the overall width is 1 metre at the widest point. So nothing can be wider than a metre at any point. There can be no sharp objects, and we need chain guards. And also we need to look at the appearance of the mower. So the appearance of the mower has to be in good condition, all right? So the idea is to make it look tidy and presentable. So we'll come over and have a look at the width of the mower. So it's pretty hard to do this with a tape measure, but effectively what we're doing is the widest part of the mower should be under 1 metre, okay? And so this is just under 1 metre at the widest point. And then the front, we do the same thing. Again, very hard to do without a proper measuring device, but if I do that to there, it's less than 1 metre underneath there. So we're happy with the width, that's fine. So then we want to look at the sharp objects. So we want to have a look at the front, no sharp objects, nothing that people can get cut with. And the side panels are not sharp either, so we're pretty happy with that. Even the guards are all being rounded off and they're not sharp, so that's all safe. So the next thing we want to look at is the footholds. So the footholds here, now we've talked about the impact zone for where things hit things, and the idea is the impact zone is between 150 and 180 millimetres. Now from memory this is 190, okay, so it's over the 180, but it's not allowed to be less than 180, and the impact zone is from 150 to 180, so that's okay. And then we talk about the height inside here. A maximum of 120 millimetres is the height inside here, but what we've been saying is that as long as from halfway along here it's 120, and from the back of here it can actually come up if you want. So as long as the front part is 120, then that's okay. And it can be made out of anything. And you can make it a checker plate. The idea is to stop mowers from coming in here and riding up and getting your legs crushed in here. So the impact zone of this is matched to the impact zone of the bumpers, so that theoretically you shouldn't end up with mowers coming inside there, okay? Now steering, we want to look at all the linkages. We want to look at how the front axle's made, how the wheels are hold on, and the steering wheel, that it's got a steering wheel. So again, we're going to come up to the front of here, and we'll just come in and go into front axle. Front axle and steering. So the front axle, all steering linkages must have threaded rod ends. They must have kingpins that have got wheel bearings that are serviceable. All bolts must have nylock nuts, castellated nuts or split pins. The front axle is to be allowed to be fully fabricated. No suspension, no shock absorbers, but you can't use aluminium to make the front cross member, so it has to be made of steel, all right? The front wheels need to also have locking in them. Left and right hand threads is acceptable, but you need to have something that's holding the wheels on. So things like over-center pins, hitch pins and bent nails are not acceptable, all right? So we'll have a look at the steering here. So what we're looking for is the steering. We want to make sure that they've got lock nuts on them. So lock nuts there, lock nuts on here, lock nuts on here. So basically any steering component should have lock nuts on them. Okay, so these have all got lock nuts on them, which is fine. They're all spherical rod ends right through to the steering here, and it needs to be in serviceable condition. So you shouldn't be able to grab this and everything not move with lots of movement in it. So that's pretty good. There's no issue with that. We need to look at the wheels themselves. So if I just swivel this around a little bit, the actual wheels themselves have got lock nuts on them as well, so that they can't come undone. You could have a split pin through here and that would do the same thing. We also need to look at the steering wheel. So it needs to have a steering wheel on it, a proper steering wheel. It doesn't have to be necessarily the mower steering wheel. This is not a mower steering, but it must have a steering wheel, no handlebars or no protruding rods at the side of it. So as long as it's got a steering wheel, we're all happy, okay? Okay, so now we're going to do the motor and drive line. So we're going to look at the gearbox. We're going to look at the drive belt. We're going to look at the size of the axle. We're going to look at the engine position, and we're going to make sure there's no forced induction. So if we come up to the web page again, we'll go into Driveline and see what it's got to say. So Driveline may be modified from the engine pulley to the rear wheels, must utilise a lawnmower transmission, transaxle or right angle drive, and any other lawnmower gearbox is acceptable. If the gearbox is built using parts, it must be an acceptable RAGB, like a fertiliser spreader box, and the gearbox must be driven from a belt from the engine. So if we come over and have a look at here, so on this particular mower we've got a right angle drive in here, which comes through and goes across. It then has a belt, which gives us the belt drive to the gearbox, and then from the gearbox to the chain. It's a chain drive. We then have to come up and look at the axle itself. So if I measured that axle, it's actually a 25mm axle. It can be up to 32, but as long as it's 25, then that's okay. And yeah, that's about it for that. Oh, the other thing we need to check out is the motor needs to be within 100mm of the original mount of the engine. So you can see the original hole from where the engine was, and it's within that original hole, so it's okay. It's not like another panel that's been put in and moved around. It's the original panel, and it's bolted basically in the original market. It has actually been moved over by about 20mm. So that's fine. It's within where it needs to be. Okay, on to the next bit. Right, so the next thing we're going to look at is no forced induction. Obviously it hasn't got a turbo on it. We need to look at the flywheel, the throttle control, the cutout switch, the battery, and the exhaust. So the flywheel, if it's it can be modified. It has to be the original one or an alloy flywheel. Throttle control has to be returning and easy to locate. Cutout switch needs to kill the engine. The battery needs to be mounted correctly, and the exhaust needs to be exiting safely away from anybody else. So we'll come and have a look at the stuff we've got here. So here's the engine. Now this motor has a alloy flywheel on, which we can see, which means that's okay. If it had a standard flywheel, that's okay. Everything else is standard. It hasn't been modified, so that's fine for the flywheel. The accelerator on this one is up on here, and it has a spring in there, and it has a spring inside the carburetor, so it basically has dual springs, and this one's a motorbike carburetor, so it's got extra springs on it there. In fact, it's got 3 springs, one up here, one in there, and one on the side of the part down here, so it's got plenty of springs to hold it back. The battery is fully mounted in here, and it's got the plastic cover which covers over the battery terminal to protect it at all times, so you need to cover the battery terminal as well. Okay, so we need to look at the exhaust. So the exhaust is not allowed to come out past the mower, and it's got to exit outwards and sort of downwards so that it can't be blowing in somebody's face. So that's the good place. You also need to have a cut-off switch, which is this one here, which is your kill switch. So when you remove that switch, it must kill the engine, and this must be able to attach. So that's your kill switch. Normally you would start it up and then we'd pull it out to make it dies, but it's a bit noisy in here, so it needs to have a kill switch that works as well. Okay, so now we'll go through the wheels and tyres. So the rear ones need to be a minimum of 8" and a maximum of 10. The front need to be a 2" difference from the rear wheels, okay? So if you're running 8 in the rear, you have to have 6 in the front, okay? And then we're going to check the tyres. They need to be turf tyres only, non-modified tyres, okay? So if we have a look at the screen here, the rear rims must be the same on each axle, made of steel or alloy in the rear. The alloy should be factory built only, and the front rims must be steel, not aluminium, and they must be not made of aluminium as well, okay? So we'll go and have a look at them. Oh, and the tyres, no ATV tyres, only turf tyres to be used. They can be tube or tubeless, and they're not allowed to be recut, regrooved or modified. So we'll go and have a look at those over here. So we're looking at turf tyres. Standard turf tyre, it actually usually says turf on the outside, and the rear ones are the same. They're turf tyres, and it usually says turf on the outside, okay? And the size of the wheels, so these back ones are 200, which is about 210, about 200, and the front ones will be 6" at the front. Okay, so there's 2" difference between them. The tyre size does not affect what you run, but the rim size must be 2" different between front or rear to keep the appearance of a lawnmower. Okay, so we'll look at seats now, the seat type and the seat height. So looking at the rules for seats, the seat must be a reasonable strength. Mower seats, cart seats, boat seats and hay-made seats are all permitted. Automotive race car seats with high backs are not allowed as they affect the appearance of the mower too much. The reason for the seat is to make sure that you are not stuck in the seat if you roll. So the seat cannot be so tight that you cannot exit it easily. So if you are running a cart seat, you need to make sure that you don't get stuck in it for reasons of rollover and injury, okay? And the other thing is the height of the rear seat must be 650 maximum above the centre line of the rear axle. So if we come over to this mower here, we're going to go down to the back. We're going to pick approximately where the front of the rear axle centre is, which is about there somewhere, and this seat is well below the 650 height. So as long as it's less than 650 high, the seat's okay. All right, so now we'll look at bumpers. So the bumpers have some rules on the web page. Front bumpers are not compulsory, but if you do have them, we talked about this impact height must be 150 to 180 minimum, and a maximum width of 650. And rear bumpers are compulsory. Again, that impact zone of 150 to 180 from the ground, a minimum width of 900 and a maximum of 980. They are not allowed to be a single straight pipe. They must have rear wheel protection area and a minimum overall height of 120 millimeters and a maximal overall height of 220 for the impact zone as we is. So whatever you end up doing there, and there's some other details there about, you know, no sharp edges, no hooked ends, all that sort of stuff. So we'll come over and have a look at the bumpers. So the first thing we'll do is have a look at the front one, which I've just got to stick back in again. So the front one slides in here. Somewhere in here. Okay, so we're looking at the height from the ground. So the 180 is here, so we're right in the middle of the impact zone for there, and it's no wider. It's actually 600 mil. So 650 is the maximum you can have. We'll come around to the rear bumper. Okay, so the rear bumper needs to be within that zone, which it is. And it can be so this one is actually exactly just over 900. So this is 910. So that's okay. No sharp edges rounded. The idea is that if a mower comes up on here, technically it shouldn't be able to pick up on the wheels and gets flipped up over the back. So this is sort of a common design. It's not just one. It's big enough to try and stop the wheel from coming into there. So that's the idea behind it. Okay, so that's bumpers. All right, into brakes. They've got to have a brake, and it can't be the original brake on the transmission. So on this one here, it's got a hydraulic brake. The brake is actually mounted on the steering wheel, and it comes through to an inboard disc, which is inside the back of there. The brake should, when you grab it, push it forward, it should lock the wheels, which it does. So it must be hydraulic brakes, must be easily accessible, whether it's foot or hand, must lock up the wheels, and must be hydraulic. We'll talk about race numbers and compliance, which is all the other things that come into it. So race numbers, a minimum of 100 millimeters. So these ones are 150. Okay, so they must be a minimum of 100 millimeters. And then we have the compliance stuff, which can be things like the starter motor must operate at all times on the mower so that you can start it without having to get off on the track. The appearance must be tidy in appearance, mustn't have sponsors and things covering over the numbers, that sort of issue, and everything else needs to be okay. So hopefully that gives you enough information about what the greensheeting is. The rules are all on the web page, they're all updated. If you have any questions, please ask your local club before you start getting carried away and getting a build and then finding out that whatever you've done doesn't actually fit within the rules. So hopefully that helps you. Yeah, next time.